Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara, who is still struggling with allergies.
It's that time of year.
It is that time, and I mowed grass all day yesterday. So
Well, that would do it.
that's doing it.
Every time I mow the grass, I get all crazy with allergies too.
Oh, boy. Yes.
Well, thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. If you would like to become a patron, visit patreon.com/speakingout. This week we are going to give a monstrous bibliography, and I don't really like recommending books. I used to have something on my website with a list of resources, and then I took that down several years ago, and I've never had the desire to put them back up.
Yeah.
Because that information is always changing. Books go in print, out of print, new books come out, and just to try to keep up with it is just one more thing on our plate.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
So we thought that it would be more beneficial to just have a full episode and to talk about our books that we connected with. These are not necessarily endorsements, though some of these books I have personally endorsed. That's not what this episode is. We just want to point you to resources that we enjoy.
Absolutely. I've only taken part in one endorsement ever, and these are definitely books that we connected with that helped us during the trials and tribulations of learning about child abuse and child molesters.
Yeah. So we split these up into 4 different categories. You're going to find that there is not a category for survivor care. And I didn't realize that till I was putting this together and just looking at the mountains of books. And we have over here's a whole bookshelf behind us, and you can't see it in the view, but there are piles and piles and rows of books. I have a whole cube of books that are in queue right now from various authors who have given me their books to read. Some of those as long as 6 months ago. So that pile is always my to-read list is always very long. So this is not an exhaustive list, and I think the reason we don't have a lot of books on survivor care is because that's not really our area of expertise. There's a lot that's written out there for survivors, by survivors. I'm looking at Nicole Braddock Bromley's book, Hush. You know, that's an excellent book. Mary DeMuth Has Not Marked. Right. We could go on and on and on. So, we do read those books, but I don't have a ton of books on my shelf for survivor care. So the first category is understanding abusers, kind of getting into the head of abusers and understanding how they work. These are not in any specific order, though I would put this at the top of the list. This is Dr. Anna Salter's book, Predators, Pedophiles, Rapists, and Other Sex Offenders, Who They Are, How They Operate, and How We Can Protect Ourselves and Our Children. Quite a mouthful.
It is, and I have to say amen to what Jimmy said. That is among the first book that I read following the arrest of your dad.
That might have been the first book that both of us read.
I think it is that, and the one that I mentioned that's out of print right now. That this was the go-to book for us for a long time.
Yeah. So Dr. Salter is a renowned researcher, psychologist in the field of child sexual abuse, and her specialty is sadistic pedophiles. So, just a treasure trove of a book. I mean, that very, very good.
It's not hard to understand.
Nope, not at all.
Right.
The other one too. This one's pretty dated, but it's still current. it's still relevant. And this is Dr. Gene Abel and his wife Nora Harlow, the Stop Child Molestation book, What Ordinary People Can Do in Their Everyday Lives to Save 3 million Children. This is one of those books that I'll just open it up just to a random page. Might be hard to see, but I literally have every page marked up. I have asterisks. I have notes.
Well, you quote from that quite frequently.
It's really
on
good.
The podcast. Yes, that's an excellent book.
Yeah. So they did extensive studies, very expensive studies into lots and lots of pedophiles. And I think he's both a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. I believe that's right. But
I know he's a medical doctor. I don't
right.
know.
Yeah. In fact, it's, on the title, it's Gene Abel,
okay.
MD.
Okay.
But I think he's also a psychiatrist. I'm pretty sure about that. But don't quote me on that. The next one, and this was like a surprising little gem. Some of these are not well-known books. We just kind of found them, and some of these are gold mines.
We were digging deep, Jimmy, in the beginning years, especially for any information we could get.
Yeah, but I think this is not a mainstream book on Amazon.
But it's a good
but
one.
it's one of the best that I've ever read.
Yes.
This one is by Betty Kuffel, Kuffel, Eyes of a Pedophile, Detecting Child Predators. She also is a medical doctor, and she looked into, she followed a case of a really brutal serial killer and child rapist by the name of Nathaniel Barjona. Really high-profile case, and she just unpacks.
She does a great job in this. Yes,
phenomenally.
Does a great job in this. And why are some of these books not higher up? I
really don't know.
I think it comes down to how people advertise them. Really, But this that's a top quality book.
If I remember, that's the one where she wrote letters back and forth to him. I get her mixed up with Carla Van Dam.
I think that this.
But
is
I
the
think
one.
I think it was
that's
her.
The one too. Yeah.
So I remember the one scene in that book
one.
where at the end she's sitting with this guy in prison, and he looks at the clock, and she kind of builds it up. It's this point where
we quoted that 2 podcasts ago,
and it's a scene where she kind of paints it as if he's finally starting to get it, and then he looks at the clock and he goes, "Oh, well, this is the time that the kids are getting off the school bus."
Yes, this is it. Okay.
So excellent book.
Yes, it is.
Really well written.
I think I read that several times actually.
And this is another one. Carla Van Dam. She is a psychologist, I believe, PhD. Carla Van Dam. This is called The Socially Skilled Child Molester: Differentiating the Guilty from the Falsely Accused. This was one that was so stinking readable. And again, I'm looking at these pages here.
I see, just
notes everywhere. Things
Yeah.
underlined.
Yeah.
I have notes written. This one really, really, really helped me understand the mind of an abuser and just how they think and how calculated they are. Again, I probably most or all of you have not even heard of that book. And then this one, man, this was a gut-wrenching book. This is by Mike Eccles, Echols. He is a reporter, of all things. The title of this book is Brother Tony's Boys: The Largest Case of Child Prostitution in U.S. History, The True Story. It's a thick book. It's a slow read. And it is, I will put trigger warnings all over this book.
I did not read that one.
It is phenomenal.
Yes, I chose not to read that.
It is really, really good. Brother Tony was a charismatic Pentecostal travel evangelist, and he rubbed shoulders with very high-profile government workers that he would prostitute these boys out, and it's all documented. So this is nothing in
Excuse
this
me.
is speculation. It's all
Right.
really well documented. He spoke to investigators. He looked at case files. I mean, really well researched, very well written. It's a heavy read, though.
Yeah, I remember beginning this, and then, yes, I put it down.
It's pretty tedious,
It is. Yes.
but I would put that in probably in my top 10.
Right.
Certainly for understanding the mind of a pedophile. And then this one we mentioned last week or the week before too. This is Philip Jenkins. He's a professor at Penn State at State College, just north of here. It's called Beyond Tolerance: Child Pornography on the Internet. I looked on Amazon. There are 8 reviews for this book. Obviously not a well-known book.
Right.
And I think it's got like 3.5 stars overall.
Right. And this might help a little bit get word out, because if people don't talk about a book, if they don't share the resource, others won't know.
Yeah.
If you go just by the reviews, sometimes the most incredible book has very few reviews.
And this one was written when the internet wasn't
Wasn't exploding.
You're right. It was 2001.
I know that.
So, people are still using what was the instant
gee.
messaging, the
AOL.
AOL, yeah.
Yeah.
So, obviously it's still kind of dated, but I'm telling you, out of every book that I've ever read to date, this is the best one for making a case that child exploitation, looking at images and videos, is anything but. That these are real victims, really being tortured. And he goes into the chat rooms, and I mean, the whole book is documented chats with pedophiles.
And the exploitation of children is not accidental.
No,
either. So
that's right. And
to me, that was the greatest proof also.
yeah, and what was so important about this book is he's actually pulling actual chats,
yeah.
what pedophiles
It's a
are
real
saying
deal,
about
yes.
these images and videos that
He
they're
uses
viewing.
phrases and words.
And it's
yes.
rough. I mean, this again, trigger warning all over this book, but that is a must read
excellent.
for anybody who says, "Oh, it's just images of children." Run to the bookstore and get this book. Order this and give this book to them, and tell them, you read this and come back to me after that, and then say it's just images. This book it's definitely an eye opener.
It is.
And then finally, in that category, Understanding Abusers, It's Okay to Tell by Lauren Book. I'll let you hold that up, because you added that one to the list.
I did add this to the list.
And it's very good.
I read this a couple of times, might even be 3 times. There were portions of it that were really a hard read for me. It's about a female abuser. And we don't have a lot about female abusers.
And a violent.
And she was very violent. And it just gives the whole rundown of why Lauren was quiet for so long, what happened when she told, and the progression of her abuse, how it took place. This helped me tremendously understand the female abuser.
Yeah.
Highly recommend this book also.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it is excellent.
Yes.
Really well written. She pulls no punches.
She doesn't. She she speaks in language that we all can understand. Lauren is amazing. She also has several children's books out, which we've read some of those, not all of them. She continues to get more and more resources out that are
And she
excellent.
has the curriculum that I've
Yes.
talked about before. It's if you go to Lauren's Kids, I think it's laurenskids.org.
Right, it is.
She has the curriculum that's called Safer, Smarter Kids, and it's compliant with the new whatever the
the laws, the guidelines.
well, this
are,
curriculum that
yeah,
they
the
use in
curriculum
schools.
guidelines. But,
Anyway, she has K through 12, and each grade has its own age-specific training for kids for the Safer, Smarter curriculum, and it is top-notch. It is really good.
And she is an incredible go-getter as far as helping victims, survivors of abuse.
Very good. Okay, now we'll shift to the category of memoirs. And some of these, there was a little bit of overlap, so, it was kind of hard to place some of these in a,
one composite box,
right,
yes.
because they kind of
Yeah.
bleed into a couple different categories, so to speak. But this one is one of the first memoirs that I ever read by Renee Alton. It's called Stumbling Toward Faith. I would grab this pretty quickly. Renee actually died from cancer. She died a pretty cruel, slow death. That's been probably 3-4 years ago now. This book it's a short read, but you want to talk about just poetic language and really understanding the mind of a survivor and how the church really causes a lot of damage for survivors. This is phenomenal. Very, 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 very well written.
Beautifully written. It is. Yes.
Okay, the next one, kind of an obvious one, but Rachel Denhollander's book, What is a Girl Worth? My Story of Breaking the Silence and Exposing the Truth About Larry Nassar in USA Gymnastics. This was very readable. It's a long book. It's trying to see. It's over. Yeah, it's almost 330 pages. So pretty long book. A lot of detail. Rachel's an attorney, so attorneys are very detail oriented, but they're also very resourceful with the words that they use. So this is one of those that it's good right out of the gate, and it closes good.
Yes. I love just her title even. It grabs you from the beginning and it walks you through, and it's excellent.
Very good book.
Yes.
This is another one by J.C. Dugard. She was kidnapped in 1991 by the husband and wife. For 18 years, she was held captive in California, brutally raped, and just an awful, awful, awful story. She was finally rescued. I forget what year that was, 2009, I believe. And
I honestly could not put this book down.
Same with me.
I could not.
Really
I
well
stayed
written.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember just holding that book. It's gripping. It's beautifully. It's written so well, and she's amazing.
I love the first words of this
She is
book
amazing.
because he didn't allow her to say her name.
Right.
And so, if you remember the first two sentences, let's get one thing straight. My name is J.C. Lee Dugard.
Yes.
And that, right out of the gate.
You end up loving her so much, and you love her to pieces.
Yeah.
And you're just fighting for her all the way through that book.
Yeah. This is another one. I just finished this one recently. This is Diane Couts. Things Fell Apart, but the Center Held. We're going to have Diane on the podcast. So, this book is really well written. She was a missionary, and actually she just spoke at a Better Way seminar out in Ohio, Hope Ann.
Okay. I've not read this, so
Yeah,
I need to.
I'll pass it on
read
to you.
that,
It's really
not
good.
read it yet. Okay.
So we're going to have her on to tell her story, because that's something, abuse in the mission field is so common. And then I don't have a hard copy of this because I bought it on Kindle, but Misty Griffin, her book is called Tears of the Silenced, A True Crime and an American Tragedy, Severe Child Abuse and Leaving the Amish. That book is really popular on Amazon. Very, very good reviews. Misty, I have a sneeze that's about to come. So
I have
trying.
a cough.
Our allergies are.
They're really bad right now.
Yeah,
I know.
it's all this
I can
pollen.
barely.
I've been fighting it for about 5 minutes now, and I know I'm going to sneeze at some point. But we have Misty, who's going to be on the show, along with other people from the Plain community. So we're going to have a panel of Misty, Audrey Kaufman, Jasper Hoffman, and Mary Byler. We're going to have them, all former Amish and Mennonite. We're going to have them on the show the week of June the 20th.
That week.
The Sunday is the 20th, so it'll air that Thursday. So we're excited about that.
I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, it's going to be very good because the Plain community, I mean, abuse is rampant. Yes. And then this one is by a good friend of mine, Les Ferguson. It's called Still Wrestling, Faith Renewed Through Brokenness. Les is also a preacher. Sadly, kind of a lesser-known story than mine. I think his story is so much more gut-wrenching and powerful, and what he went through
really
was
traumatic.
Horrendous.
It is horrific. And I think just knowing him makes it even more difficult to imagine what he went through.
Yeah, so Les and I, we're very good friends. His wife, Karen, and their 21-year-old disabled, mentally disabled son, Cole, were murdered by Cole's abuser, sexual abuser, who was a beloved church member at the church that Les used to preach at. And they were murdered October 10th, 2011, which was their 24th wedding anniversary. It was Columbus Day.
I do. Every time I recount what he went through.
And incidentally, in 2013, 2 years after the tragedy, on October 10th, I birthed. Natalie birthed.
You didn't birth. I was going to say, don't let Natalie hear that.
Natalie birthed our middle child, Cameron, and Les was the second person I called from the hospital the day that Cameron died. So it was on the anniversary of the double homicides, the day that my son was born. So,
there's
just
a big connection there.
Yeah.
Yes. He's an incredible person, by the way.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yes. And he's funny and funny and fun. And
he is. And he's been through tremendous things.
Yeah.
So.
And we're going to have him on as a guest too. He already said yes. So we're just working on scheduling. And then I did not read this book.
I have read this multiple times. Miss America by Day by Marilyn Van Derber. She is a former Miss America from 1958. She was horrifically abused by her father for years, and she went through so much, including paralysis for a period of time from the trauma and from her all of the backlash of the abuse. Her mother did not believe her. Her mother was horrible to her. And she tells her story in such a way that, trust me, you will not want to put this book down. Marilyn also has many videos that are on YouTube. She is a top-notch speaker. She talks about how she hid all of the abuse for her whole life. She was in her 40s, I believe, when she finally disclosed her abuse. A great, great book. Talks about all the physical as well as mental effects of trauma and abuse. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked this book up for
this
several years.
So much. I've actually corresponded by email with Marilyn. She's an incredible person.
See if she'll come on the show.
I should ask
reach
her.
out to her. Ask her for sure.
I will do that.
Yeah.
I will do that.
That would be fantastic.
Yes.
So that's what we have for now. Again, we're not overlooking memoirs. There are other ones that are good. Some of them fall in a different category, and we'll mention that here briefly. But if you have sent me or Mom your book and it didn't make this list, that doesn't mean we don't like your book.
Right. It's just it hasn't been
I literally
read.
have
right.
that top left one there. Those are all the books that are in queue right now.
I have a stack in a box, Jimmy.
That is a big pile of books.
Need to be read. Same here.
Just
yes.
As I read 2 books, I get 5 more in the mail. Right. So, okay. So for churches, this would be books that would be good to send to church leaders to really help them understand the dynamics of abuse. So if you're thinking church leaders, you have anybody who has ears to hear, and you're looking for a bibliography to send them books, these would be the books I would start with. So one is by our friend Krista Brown.
Yes.
This Little Light, Beyond a Baptist Preacher Predator and His Gang. Krista was on this podcast, episodes 116 and 117. Krista also, incidentally, wrote the foreword to my book.
She's amazing.
Love her.
She was an amazing guest. Terrific book also.
Yeah.
Written so easy to understand, written so well.
Yeah. And we often, we talk about this in advocacy, that Krista's kind of the godmother of us other advocates, because she was standing up to abusers and abusive systems before Me Too was even a thought.
Right.
So, she has been in the trenches for a long, long time and has never given up. She also started the database for the Baptist Church, and then handed the torch over. Megan and Dominic Benninger picked up that baton, and they're running with that. So, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And the Benningers were, and they were on as guests too, and that was really, really good.
Yes.
Okay, let me keep these piles somewhat organized, because I'm gonna have to reshelf them, and I just went through and organized my bookshelf yesterday. The next one for churches is Mary DeMuth, We Too, How the Church Can Respond Redemptively to the Sexual Abuse Crisis. We had Mary on way back in the early days of the podcast, episode 29, before she wrote this book.
We love Mary.
We do. And Mary apparently loves us, because this book is dedicated to the two of us. So that was kind of a high honor.
Yes.
But this is, from theology to practical application, from every imaginable avenue that you can think of, this book is just top notch. Very, very, very well written, well researched, great theology. This book is rock solid. I honestly couldn't find one part of this book that I found disagreement with.
Right.
Okay. Flip the page, keep going through our monstrosity of a list.
Ooh, who wrote that book?
Yeah, so I'm not one to self-promote, but I specifically wrote this book for churches to really, as a church leader who reported my own dad with mom, and then had to walk a church through the aftermath of abuse. I wrote this specifically with church leaders in mind. There's, a couple chapters on theology. It is a memoir, but I also wrote it as a theological and a practical book.
I was going to say, Jimmy, that's a composite of so much information for us, and the way you wrote it is so easy to follow.
Yeah.
You just progress through and you follow it very, very easily. You've guided us through. It's excellent.
And it's a quick read.
Yes.
So episode 138, we talk about this book.
Yes.
So if you're on the fence and you don't know whether to order it or not, it may or may not be for you, but go to episode 138 and you'll get to hear what the book is about. The next one that I would highly recommend for church leaders to really help them understand why churches need to respond well is by one of our patrons, actually, and good friend, Sandy Phillips Kirkham. Let Me Pray Upon You, Breaking Free from a Minister's Sexual Abuse. We interviewed her about this book, episodes 108 and 109, and
she's an amazing person.
She's phenomenal.
There again, well written, easy to understand. She tells the story so well. She explains things in depth. She's incredible.
And I think much like Krista Brown, she doesn't provide any wiggle room for church leaders. So you can't, a church leader cannot pick this up and read it and be like, yeah, I see where she's coming from, but you can't walk
Very
away.
Forthright.
Yeah.
She's, yeah.
Can't walk away
Right.
not being touched by this
No.
book.
Yeah.
The next one is this is a book that I wrote an endorsement for, and actually, I know this is kind of sad to say, but it's just my bad memory. I actually forgot writing an endorsement,
I did not read this.
and
book,
it is really,
actually.
really, really
I did
good.
not read that. Okay.
So this is Beth Robinson and Latane Scott, Protecting Your Child from Predators, How to Recognize and Respond to Sexual Danger.
I don't know how I missed that.
It is, well, here you go.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Add
can
that
I
to your
borrow
to-read
that?
list.
Thank you.
It is really, really
Okay,
good.
Thank you. I will read that. Yes.
Another one is another one we had on as a guest, Wade Mullen. Something's Not Right, Decoding the Hidden Tactics of Abuse and Freeing Yourself from Its Power. That was episode 120 that we had Wade on,
yes.
and this book is really well written. And this is one that there aren't peaks and valleys in the book. It's like kind of a Wade. I think Wade is kind of like me. You're kind of like a choo-choo train, and you just, you start out and you keep chugging along. And I didn't feel like there were any parts of the book where I was like, can we get through this? It was just really good information from start to finish, based on his research. Oh, let's see. Another book that I wrote an endorsement for, Anne Marie Miller, and her book is Healing Together, A Guide to Supporting Sexual Abuse Survivors. I have been in conversation with Anne for about 3 years now to be on the podcast. Maybe not that long, maybe 2 years. But it's just one of those things we're both busy. I just messaged her again today. So she's in nursing school. Her workload is crazy. She had that bad accident. I don't know if you guys remember that, where she went to a camp to help. It was a trauma camp, and it was like on day 2, I think. There was an accident with where she got a baseball bat to the face and knocked out a whole bunch of her teeth.
I do remember it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her jaw was
Yes,
wired shut for months.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
pretty brutal.
Yeah,
So
it was.
anyway, her
Yes.
book, it is just really, really good. Well-rounded. Boz Tchividjian, also, I'm looking on the cover, Boz Tchividjian wrote an endorsement for it. And I wouldn't endorse it if I didn't believe in it. So
It's pretty
it's
incredible
very good.
to think the resources we now have available, isn't it?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
They weren't there when we,
No.
back when we first went through
wow.
that.
I remember
most of these
searching
books
and
weren't
digging
there.
and looking and just wanting something to be out there. This is incredible.
Yeah. Lots of good stuff.
Yes.
Okay, this one is by Boz Tchividjian and Shira Berkovitz. It's called The Child Safeguarding Policy Guide for Churches and Ministries. We interviewed Boz on our 100th episode, and not about this book, but
It was a great interview.
it was.
Yes.
It was a good interview and
Yeah.
very insightful.
Yes.
This is not meant to be a,
Fun read.
a narrative.
Yeah.
It is a manual. It is what it says it is. It's a guide, and it helps churches think through and build a policy from the ground up. So,
And
to my knowledge,
it's with a legal aspect.
Right.
Also.
so there's the moral,
Right.
ethical,
Right.
spiritual, and legal
Right.
aspects. So pretty well rounded. To my knowledge, it's the only book that's out there that's actually written as a manual
Yeah.
to build a policy. So it's very good.
Incredibly important for churches.
Yeah. And then this one is out of print, and this is probably one of the least known books on the face of the planet, and I don't know why. It's one of the best I've ever read. It's by Patrick Parkinson, and it's called Child Sexual Abuse and the Churches, Understanding the Issues. I found one copy on Amazon for like $150, and
Hang on to this one, Jim.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to sell mine for $1,000 if any of you guys want it.
I knew you'd say something like
Well,
that.
and it's even, it has my notes all through it.
Yeah.
I have things underlined. This guy is the guy, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. His chapter on forgiveness is what planted the seeds for me to rethink forgiveness. And it is phenomenal. This book, and he's an attorney from Australia. And it's just, it's phenomenal. This book, hands down, is one of the best.
To get that book back in print.
I don't know if he has that much say-so in it, but it'd be worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really, really good. So if you guys can find a way to get that back in print, let me know. Okay. And then the last category is psychology and science. And this is just kind of me helping understand the nuts and the bolts of how abusers think. So these books are not necessarily about abuse or sexual abuse. But number one, top of the list, Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear and Other Survival Signals That Protect Us from Violence. This is one of the best books that I've ever read, ever, about understanding the psychology of abusers.
Yeah,
is really good.
Yes, it is.
It's a number one national bestseller. Trying to think when this was written. I'll have to look. Hit my cheat sheet. Okay, so this tells you, 1997, this book is still doing really, really well on Amazon
And
this
that
many
says
years later.
something
It's
about
timeless.
the book, right.
Yeah, it's evergreen.
It is. Right.
And then the other ones I have on Kindle, so I don't have physical copies to show you, but Robert Cialdini, his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, is top-notch. I use excerpts from that book when I do trainings nationally, and it is just really, really good. I mention this book a lot. Dr. Stephen Macknick and his wife, Dr. Susana Martinez Conde, the two neuroscientists, their book changed everything. It flipped my world upside down and changed everything about the way I think about abusers.
When you first discovered their book.
Yeah.
And I remember we had just begun the podcast very early on with our podcast. And you got a hold of that book. And it's phenomenal. Lit the light bulbs.
Yeah. It is really good. So we've collaborated some, but their book is called Sleights of Mind, What the Neuroscience of Magic Reveals About Our Everyday Deceptions. This is a book that I often say has nothing to do with abuse, because that's not what it's about. It has nothing to do with abuse, and it has everything to do with it.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
It's phenomenal.
Yes.
Then finally, Robert Hare. His book is Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us. Robert Hare developed what's known as a PCLR, and it's a test that's administered in all prisons in Canada, United States, and I think all or most of Europe. And it's called the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. And what this test does is it figures out if somebody is a true psychopath, diagnosable
you've talked about this
psychopath.
Before in a couple of our podcasts. Yes. You went into depth about it, actually.
It's very, very, very good.
Yes.
So if you want to understand how people can abuse children, or adults for that matter, and not have a twinge of their conscience even mildly disturbed, read Robert Hare's book and it'll make sense to you. They are just wired differently, literally. So anyway, that's our current list. Just a handful of books.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's not
There's
even, I'm looking at my bookshelf here and it's not even scratching the surface.
Hours of reading and research. But I'll tell you what, it changes us, because once we begin to understand the mind of a predator, we become equipped to deal with the predator and to prevent our children from being harmed by the predator. So
Yeah.
these books, pick and choose a couple at a time and read them, and fill yourself with knowledge, become equipped.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, and categories are important, so that's why we laid them
Right.
out like that. Because what might connect with some of you may not. Others of you might be like, well, I don't want to read anything on
Right.
that has to do with abuse in the church. I just want to get in the mind of a pedophile. Well, great. That's
Yes.
why we categorize
Right.
them, and not all of these books are going to be for everybody, but. Anyway,
There's a good bit to choose from.
lots,
So, right.
lots and lots.
Yes.
I don't have a truth bomb. I don't know if you have a truth bomb.
I believe we need to fill ourselves with knowledge, the knowledge that's available if we're going to do this right.
Yeah.
If we're going to put handcuffs, so to speak, on the abuser and stop our children from being harmed.
There you go. Words of wisdom from my mother. Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
it's good stuff. We will keep adding to this list. We'll do a follow-up episode at some point. And we'll have more to add, lots more. But until then, we thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.